In a world where our friends call us not us united and our enemies call us midnight rain, two dudes must learn to podcast as the Fremen do in order to survive the desert planet of endless content. We don't care how many enemies we have. They'll never be prepared for us. Not us united. There's something, I don't know if it's in the air tonight, but it feels warm. Maybe it's this hot mic. Feels good.
Maybe because it's like 80 degrees outside?
Maybe. I don't know. I'm thinking these mics are a little hot, though.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just good to be back.
Maybe it's good to be back. Maybe it's good to be with the Dungeon Master of this podcast.
You're too kind.
Yeah. Oh. I thought
Oh.
I was talking from your perspective.
Oh, right. Yeah. Fair. Yeah, you're definitely the DM.
I guess.
Yeah. And I just am stuck in your world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And boy, am I having fun.
Well, that's two vague references to the movie that we're going to be talking about today.
Yes.
And that's Dungeons and Dragons.
It's right to the point of this.
Subtitle. Hold on.
Sorry.
Subtitle. I'm the Dungeon Master.
You're right.
Subtitle. Honor Among Thieves, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they all thieves?
Probably.
Maybe.
Yeah.
You're about to find out?
Yeah. We're right to the point here at Not Us United.
We are.
We don't dolly around and introduce a title and then say something else and get off topic.
It's true.
We're professional.
All gas, no brakes,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah. Except for content. And
true.
for
And tangents.
movies. I don't know.
But yeah, maybe we stick away from the tangents because you're just really excited about this movie.
I'm very excited to talk about Dungeons and Dragons
Yeah.
Honor Among Thieves. Probably.
Are you alluding to maybe they didn't have to have a tagline?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. Because I'm just going to say, oh, D&D. But then Dungeons and Dragons, I don't know. There's already the Dungeons and Dragons original, right? So you can't, like...
Yeah. I mean, you can get away with it, but yes.
It just feels like it's kind of tacked on, in my opinion. I'm like, when I say, do you want to go see Dungeons and Dragons? Like, you invited me. You're like, you want to see Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah. I don't know if that's, like, super profound. But, yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't think you were confused. Like, you mean the 80s movie? Like, you want me to go to the theater and watch a movie that came out 40 years ago?
Yeah, but, like, when you... So you can say, like, when you said, you want to see John Wick this week. I knew you were talking about John Wick 4. But
Sure.
when you're like, do you want to see Dungeons and Dragons? No one's... Wait, where am I going with this?
Yeah, please continue.
No one's going to be like, do you mean... No one's going to say to you, do you want to watch Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves? No one's going to say that.
Yeah, you're right.
Do you want to see the dungeon? Do you want to see the dungeon? And even when it comes out on like DVD or whatever.
Yeah.
Here's my age. I'm saying DVD instead of Blu-ray or whatever.
I get you.
You say you're not going to say, do you want to watch Dungeons and Dragons?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, yeah, the new one.
Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you want to move on?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so this is Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. Can be confusing for some.
Thank you for being the, what did we just say?
DM?
Yeah.
Dungeon Master?
That too.
Oh, I got you, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, roll for initiation.
Yeah.
Or initiative.
I got a 1.
Nice, yep.
So.
Natural miss.
Yeah. This whole podcast.
I think this episode is going to be a natural crit.
Yeah.
A nat 20.
Nat 20, if you will.
Nat 20.
Yeah, as they say in the world of D&D.
Here's why. This movie doesn't require knowledge of the board game.
Yep.
Or the tabletop game.
Mm-hmm.
But it will honor
Yep. Keep going.
any thieves that go and see this movie.
That is among them. Yeah.
That have played the game.
Yep.
But it's also not a huge reference fest.
Oh, no way.
There's definitely like little pieces here, like a monster that's a very popular monster or something like that.
Or
will
like
like
a
show
location
up.
will be said. Or...
But we saw this. It was you, me, and my wife Kate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at the end she was like, it would have been nice to know a few of those things, but it wasn't like, oh man, this movie sucks because I've never played Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good
I think they did a good job of using the IP to make an entertaining film without it being so gatekeepy.
Yeah.
We have to just truly pay homage to all the players.
Because they're in a kind of a tricky spot because Dungeons and Dragons has some lore, but it's also like a world where you can be like, I'm going to be like Luke Skywalker in medieval times or whatever.
It's a good, for clarification, there is like technically a world of Dungeons and Dragons that you can get the base books in and like play kind of in that sandbox where they've already created enough of the things. Like if you've watched Stranger Things, that's what they play together. That's there are certain monsters that exist in that world specifically. But what's kind of come from that is like now that people have played that enough, they can kind of take the base rules of that and then go, let's do it in Star Wars. Let's do it in our own world. Let's play a Game of Thrones version of this or a Lord of the Rings version where you kind of can still take a lot of the main components, which essentially is just, it's a board game where your character is far more customized and asymmetrical to the party that you're playing with. And another thing that makes it unique is it is mostly cooperative with one person kind of building a story. And so it can be a really cool bonding game because you're literally in someone's mind playing one of your favorite board games, basically, as a team. So super cool concept, but it can be anything. But this is definitely, it does exist in the lore.
Yes, this world.
Of the world of Dungeons and Dragons.
Sure. But I felt like, you definitely need to, and I'm not a big Dungeons and Dragons. I've only played really one time, but I've listened to people and watched people like play online, and it's it's fun. But like, I don't think you need to know anything. Like, this is just a medieval world. Like at this point, like I went into the movie just being like, oh, this is just some world.
Yep.
Okay, and the Dungeons and Dragons tag is slipped onto it, and then that made me think, if there wasn't a Dungeons and Dragons title on this movie, would I have enjoyed it as much as I did? If it was just like swords and shields.
Yeah, I don't know if you would have gone into the theater if this movie was literally just called like Honor Among Thieves.
Yeah.
It's like, what is this?
Yeah.
Whatever. I think the theme still was tied to the game enough where there was I don't think this was so divorced from Dungeons and Dragons though. Like, I think it still deserved to be called that. Do you still feel that way, or do you feel like
in a certain respect,
or does it feel too generic?
It feels a little generic where I'm like, it's the wizard, and
there is a party.
Right. But even that, it's like, oh, the magic system. It's like, and then you're this type of species, and then you're this magic, and it's like, cool. This is kind of, also because like Dungeons and Dragons is pretty like base fantasy. It's like, here's like what everything else has been kind of like based off of, in a sense. Of like, okay, you got your wizard, you got your rogue, you got your bard, and it's like, here's like these
apart from like
roles.
Lord of the Rings, like there really isn't
Yeah.
anything that predates a lot of the monsters and lore that exists in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, so it did a huge thing to do that, where, I mean, there's a few moments where, I mean, you turned to me one moment and said, oh, this is literally Dungeons and Dragons, where like people are doing a fight and one character's doing kind of something else, and and there's a little bit to that, but I'm not saying this as a negative towards the movie. I'm saying it as like, oh, if this was a different titled movie, I don't think I would have, my enjoyment of it wouldn't have changed.
Oh, I thought that's what you were saying. I thought you were saying...
I don't know. Like, I was saying maybe, but I don't think it will.
Got it.
If it was just Chris Pine-led fantasy movie,
Sure.
like, oh, this is just... I would be almost even more surprised because I enjoyed this movie.
Yeah.
And because...
Quality. Yeah.
Like, I didn't... You kind of have, like, the Dungeons and Dragons, like, kind of finesse to it, where you're like, oh, it's kind of an established idea, IP... where if it was just a no-name thing, I'd probably be more surprised because it came out of nowhere and it surprised me.
Yeah.
Anyways, do you want to move on from this topic? Yes.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for answering for me, Dungeon Master. Yeah, I think, trying to think of some non-spoilery things, I think what helps it is maybe using that word generic is helpful because... it's not bogged down by being a specific, like I told Kate this when we were coming back. Nobody's playing a character in this world that would be the equivalent of like a Captain America or like,
Sure.
oh, this is the Avengers of Dungeons and Dragons. Like that hero is this guy. Like, so he has a lot of it. They didn't use any of that. These are clearly made up people that exist in this world. And I think that's helpful because there's no baggage. And so the characters are exactly what they need to be for the story rather than, oh, wait, did they just introduce this guy? There's a lot more they could do with him. And now we're disappointed because we were thinking, oh, that D&D character could have.
Yeah, I think stripping it of basically the whole lore. And I also think not doing a Jumanji where it's like, oh, this just happened to be like a board game night. That
would have been
awry.
wild if like at the end there was like a bunch of celebrities playing this game. But yes,
that would have cut. I think this just needs to be in the world. And it did exactly what I think was a great idea. And also not being like, kind of like comparing it to Warcraft that came out a few years ago.
Right.
That felt very much like, dude, you got to be in the lore to really even get this. But this is just, it's just so close to being generic enough in my mind that it's like, does it even need to be a D&D movie? I love that it's a D&D movie, but it's like so close in my mind that I don't see the D&D.
I wonder if that will negatively affect someone who's like, oh man, I can't wait to see a bunch of stuff from this world. But I thought this was the best for general audience.
For sure, yeah.
So yeah, I think if you're looking for something very specific, then it might not be quite enough for you. But I think they did an excellent job of. And there's no way that this is like set up for like sequels or anything like that, but it's also not. Like I mean,
blatant.
It could
Theoretically,
continue.
this could go forever because
and you could just have fun with it.
Yeah.
But no, I thought it was a good job, and I think everyone knew their roles, knew their jobs, and I just think it was overall just a really good time.
I thought the cast was great. I thought the team dynamic was really strong. I thought there was really some inventive scenes and choreography, and I was like, especially being like a fantasy world where you could get a lot of the same things. They kind of turn a few things on their head and do some interesting things that felt different and fresh that made me enjoy it a lot.
Yeah. One thing that I thought was interesting was from the original trailer, there was like some classic rock songs that were playing over it, and I was like, oh no, is this going to be like Thor Ragnarok Dungeons and Dragons where they get us with like all these awesome songs and I'm going to forget that it's actually like a bad movie or something? Not that Ragnarok was, but there was definitely like they used some of those to their advantage and it was like, oh man, now the bar has been set. So I feel like some of these trailers are like, come to our movie, we played AC/DC. And you're like, okay, hold on. And they actually didn't do that. Like it was more of a score throughout the whole thing. They didn't try to play on like an 80s, rock band or like Master of Puppets or like do the Stranger Things thing,
It would just feel weird, like because you are in this fantasy world. And I thought the score was really good. I noticed it at a few points. I was like, oh, this is nice. It has like the action scenes have like this nice like fiddle kind of playing to it.
We actually kind of escape into a new world.
Because if like all of a sudden AC/DC comes on, I'm like, this isn't working.
This is playing more towards your experience of playing D&D, not this world.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought overall really good. Let's get into some spoilers. Where would you rate this movie?
I put it at a solid 8.
Very good.
I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. I know maybe before me just talking about kind of these weird topics, maybe
that's just you.
Yeah, that's
you're fine.
Sorry, just like I did really enjoy the movie. I
100%.
thought there were some really inventive things. Everyone did their job, casting wise, exactly right. I mean, like this is better than it should be. There's 100%. No reason this should be 100%. An 8. And like I think it's just it's a fun movie, especially to watch with friends. I want to watch it with our group of friends that we play games with because it feels just like, oh, that feels very much like a Unity thing. But I don't even necessarily have many flaws with the movie either. It's just like, it's not mind blowing.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. But like, I think it did its job, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an
Yeah.
absolute masterpiece.
Like, I'd recommend it to people for
100%,
sure. But,
yep.
like, is it one of the greatest movies of all time? No.
Mhm.
So, 8.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you at 8. I think if you would have asked me right when the credits rolled, I would have said an 11 out of 10.
Yeah, my boy was hyped.
I
in
had
this movie.
to I had to come back down, but I wouldn't like knock it too much. I think those 2 points are more just for like. I mean, I think there's good character development for some of the characters. I think some serve their purpose, and that's kind of what they're there for. And so, like I said, like it does err more on the side of like generic, like we need a bard, a barbarian, a sorcerer, a druid, and they all kind of form their roles with some people getting more time than others.
Yeah.
And so there's just some like level of like, I was looking forward to a certain character being in it, and they definitely didn't have as much screen time, so I won't spoil that until we get into the next section. But I didn't like knock it for that, but I was also like, oh, I thought this was going to be more of a shared, like the party is already formed, all 5 people are going to have the exact same screen time, and just little things like that. But man, it far out exceeded my expectations.
Yeah, no doubt.
I thought it could feel like a cash grab. It could be that thing where it's like, hey, as long as we put D&D in the title, we'll get at least X number of people.
Sure.
And another thing I'll say, this movie came out 2 weeks ago.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
And our theater was packed.
Packed on a Tuesday.
I think this was the one movie that kind of reminded me of like a Marvel-esque, like back in the, like 2010s.
Yeah.
Where you went and saw it with people.
Mm-hmm.
Like you didn't go and see it just like one by yourself.
Yeah, this was a group thing.
And I felt like a lot of people were like sitting next to like 3 people that they probably played D&D with.
Yeah.
Like that's what it felt like.
It was kind of special in that way.
It was cool. And there were some people that were like hooting and hollering like the whole time. They clearly just like live and breathe D&D. And so like when somebody like shows up or like a gelatinous cube might make an appearance,
classic. People
just lost their crap. And it was awesome. And it reminded me that no matter how nerdy I think I am, I'll never be nerdy enough.
That's fair.
It was very humbling
Yeah.
in that like, and maybe comforting that like,
Yeah.
I'm like, am I too weird? I'm like, no, there's always going to be one person that's just a little bit quirkier than me.
I think we have a fine line, Nick, you and I, of being like, we are quite nerdy, but we
get put in our place pretty fast.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
I'll go into a board game store and it's like, I own quite a few board games. And then you can just tell, no, that guy definitely owns like 500 board games.
Yeah. Oh, dude, imagine how much board game and tabletop money has been spent on the people on our cinema. Like,
oh, sure.
in that room alone, dude, people put in money.
$1 million.
Yeah. Oh,
$1 million.
Yeah. $1 million have been spent on tabletop and board games in that room.
Oh, geez. Yeah. It was,
Because I've spent a good...
Yeah, I've spent thousands of dollars on board games.
Games.
I've definitely spent that amount of money.
Which is just kind of a crazy number to think
It's
about.
True. It's true.
Like, I look at my board game wall and I'm like, that's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. The thing, too, that's interesting about being... sometimes when we feel like outcasted a little bit of like, oh, I'm a little more into this hobby than others around me, is the nice thing that comes from that is they know that you're the board game person.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been gifted a lot of board games.
Yeah.
Or like a lot of movies, or like a lot of movie gift cards.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of nice, because like I look at my collection, I go, oh wait, I don't actually like... I didn't buy half of those.
Yeah, it's true. That's true.
And that helps support my addiction.
That's true. Like, I don't think
It's like, I didn't buy all those cigarettes.
They were just given to me. I don't have a problem because I didn't spend any money on this.
No. If I only buy one game a month, that's only 12 games a year.
Yeah, and so I ended up with 25.
And as long as I get rid of a few, it's fine.
Yeah, yeah. This is our...
Yeah.
Yeah, our AA program.
We are on the edge, right there.
Yeah, I think we are on the edge.
Mm-hmm.
And the edge is...
We hold each other accountable by saying, hey, we actually have to play this game, or we're just not.
Exactly. I invested in Frosthaven.
Yes.
And we are going to play.
We have to, because you spent a lot of money on it, so I will play it with you, for sure.
And so, yeah. Anyways, let's go into some spoilers for Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves.
Yeah. Again, listeners who are just going to be like, oh, I've heard this one before. This movie just has heart in places that I did not think it would.
Yep.
Honor Among Thieves makes me think we are going to be watching a romp with despicable human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And they were not.
Yeah, I liked them more than I thought. That's a good point.
They were lovely.
Yeah.
They are flawed.
Mm-hmm.
But most of our characters that we would create for a D&D world have that, because that's what makes for good storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
What is their motives? What is that? And this movie starts off with literally Chris Pine giving you his backstory because he's been put on trial. Oh, you didn't see that part.
So yeah, we should go over that.
Okay.
I
you missed the first 15 minutes of this movie.
Yeah. So I walk in and it's the title sequence of the dungeon.
Yes.
So I'm like, okay, I guess I didn't miss that much. So
essentially Chris Pine and
Michelle Rodriguez.
Yes. She and him are both in jail, have been for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically get to make their claim for, like, you've had good behavior. What's your case? Can you, like, not escape, but be let go? So he tells his backstory, and it's just fascinating because, like, the meta-ness of that is really cool because it's used so well for giving us an understanding for what this character has lost and all that. But it also is exactly what would happen on night one of like a D&D campaign starting, is everyone would share their backstory so you get to understand a little bit more of their motives. It also gives the dungeon master a chance to be like, maybe there's some story beats that I could take from that and sprinkle those in throughout the campaign. So I just like that it didn't feel forced. It felt respected, but not for the sake of the story, but actually enhanced the story.
Yeah.
So I think they did a good job there. And you can't have an opinion on that because you didn't see it. So it was good, and you thought so too.
Whatever you think.
Now let's get to the part where you actually have seen it.
Yeah.
What was what were some spoiler things that you were like, hey, 10 out of 10, 8 out of 10?
Yeah, 10 out of 10, but then going down to an 8. I thought there were 3 scenes that I loved.
I want to hear all of them.
Thank you. Wow, this is so encouraging. The first one was that kind of dragon scene.
You're correct.
Oh, I'm correct. I think I said I'm cracked. But I am cracked.
Both.
The dragon scene, because I like the dragon scene because you were like, oh, there's this ferocious dragon. And it's just a big old dragon. Yeah. And that's like you could have had a classic scene where it's like, run away from a really fast
We're in a dungeon, and here's a dragon.
Yeah.
Oh, we did it.
I didn't even think of that. Oh, I didn't think of that. But like that created a different idea of like, okay, how would that dragon move, and how would that like fight? And so like I thought that was really inventive and fun. I love that graveyard scene.
100%.
That scene is so good.
Yes,
that's where you talk about like a D&D. That's a D&D moment right there.
Yes, where it's this. It can be a serious fantasy setting, but there can be comical beats throughout. And when you're playing together, there is that level of like, hey, it can't just be combat only. There has to be areas where we talk to people, we find out clues, and there are some fetch quests so that we can get to the main parts of this. And so I think that was well done. But I do love that they like explain how the magic works. There's a part where they go, why is it only work that way? Which is the spell is you can bring someone back from the dead to ask them questions, but you can only ask them 5.
It's like,
and then they go back to dead.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, why 5? And they're like, we don't know. That's just the lore reason.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about that is like, for writing a story with your friends,
they would ask you that. Why 5?
Why? They would say that
because I said 5.
Yeah, and so there is just some of that's kind of fun that they did, but I don't feel like it ever is like bad writing.
Yeah,
I just feel like it's just
it's like
fun.
That's where it's like this is the D&D name where they're kind of winking at the camera, and then the first one they talk to where it's just like they mistakenly ask them the question. I'm like, that's so funny because that's exactly how basically the body is like a dungeon master at that point.
Yes,
and he's like yes, no, and then poof, and it's just like
it's perfect.
That's exactly what like a strict good dungeon master would do.
Yes. And then you also just have like moments where Chris Pine is like given like these incredibly valuable items, and then he immediately hands it to somebody else to carry it.
Yeah.
And just stuff like that, where it's just like, wow, you've been handed like this incredibly powerful helmet, and it's like, yeah, but we just put it in our backpack because like we gotta keep going. They're just like little things like that are nice, that aren't distracting, aren't overly stupid, but just are like, perfect.
Yes.
I just think those were like good chef kiss moments.
Yeah. So that's where it like really, I think that was the most Dungeons and Dragons moment to me, and the most like fun concept was that graveyard scene.
Okay.
As well, my boys from Auntie Donna, which is an Australian group, like comedy sketch. They played some of the graveyard people.
Oh, sick.
Some of the little zombie guys.
Okay, did you just look that up afterwards, or how did you know that?
I didn't know that, but then I listened to a podcast that's Australian, from a different Australian guy.
Nice.
And they're like, oh, these guys were on there. I was like, oh, I didn't even notice them because they were covered in makeup.
Cool. Very cool.
So like I think I've talked about it on the podcast. They had this Auntie Donna Big Old House of Fun. It's the name of it's like just comedy sketch. So they're really cool guys. And I was like, oh, this is like their big, I guess a big thing for them to kind of like do a cameo in this. And,
and that was like one of the most memorable scene.
Yeah. And they have a Netflix show now. So it's like, cool.
Sick. Good for them.
I sent you a video. They're the ones that's the bevy with the boys.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so they're the dead people.
Yeah.
Cool. Scene number 3.
Scene number 3 is so they have the Hither Tither, which is a great name. The Hither Tither stick, which is a portal gun. And it goes hither and it goes tither. I love that. That's a great
That's the scene.
No, hold on. It's not done
good.
yet, but I'm explaining it. Okay. But I love that stick. It's so cool.
Oh yeah, just hither tither. Got me.
Yeah, I was thinking about that stick for a long time.
Okay.
The name of it was like, they could have just named it the teleportation stick.
Yeah.
But the name it Hither Tither, I'm like, oh, that just...
The staff of teleportation.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, they had so much fun with that naming.
100%.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting choked up.
Hither Tither.
They have to break into this vault.
Yes.
And they use the Hither Tither stick to, like, break in. And they could have done it so it's like, oh, you shoot it through a window and you're in the carriage. But the way that they do it is so creative. It's so, like, just... inventive and fun, and it's like they turned a scene that could have been so simple into 100%. Like probably one of the best scenes in the movie.
Super cool.
And like there's great camera movement, and there's just like inventive, like they have to like you have to like think about like, okay, wait, they're nailing boards through the mirror, and like then they're coming through, and then she and like the druid like changes shape, and it's just like this felt so. This is where, like, the inventive, fun brain,
the cooperative party,
the party played a part there. I think that scene was incredible.
That was very awesome.
Yeah.
Whether you're hither or tither, that scene was
there. You go.
Cracked.
Nice.
I agree with all 3 of your scenes. I think they're awesome. We'd be doing a disservice if we did not mention Ray-Jean Page.
Oh, Ray-Jean Page.
The Paladin.
He's incredible.
He understood the assignment.
Yes.
The story knew how to use him and sprinkle him correctly and not overdo it. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing. I thought he was going to be in it more. Yeah,
that's the character you were saying earlier.
That and the druid. I thought the druid was going to have a little bit more of an arc. I felt like she was more just like ironically, like there's a barbarian, and like the druid is almost more of like the tank that they're just like, hey, you're kind of like there to just punch stuff.
You're the owl bear.
She had some cool, like they tied her in correctly. Like I think she has a good motive to do it, and she does have the least in common with everyone else because she's only connected via like a bad relationship that like didn't even like flourish at all. So it makes sense that she's a little more distant. So I'm just excited if she's in it again because I think she is awesome.
Yeah, I like
her
character.
I just don't think they like utilized her to the full potential. Whatever. It's not her story though, so I'm okay with it. But
Yeah, just to stay on that for a second, it felt like, yeah, her signing up was really good. Like,
yes,
the reasoning for that, I got that, but then at the end, it's like, okay, you did it. Why are you still?
it was
sticking
essentially
around?
like
Yeah,
it was like getting the Hulk onto the Avengers, but then like after he's there and he turns into the Hulk, it's like cool. Now that's all you can do.
yeah,
And so like there were some creative things like, hey, I'll turn into the worm and like get through it. Like anytime she did her like shape shifting stuff, it was awesome. I think they did a great job with CGI. It was great. I just thought everyone else kind of got like a cool thing to happen at the end, and her thing that she got to do at the end was she just kind of like got to beat up the person a little bit more.
Yeah.
It wasn't like this big. It's fine. Whatever.
Yeah.
Nitpicking is what that would
right.
be. But the Paladin was done very well with just his righteousness, as like this character that could looked at like everyone kind of did their like lawful good,
Yeah,
neutral, whatever, like chaotic evil. There's like all of the characters, and he is so well done that you kind of hate how good he is,
Yes.
but you can't be mad because he's not.
He's not doing it in like a prideful
Yeah,
way.
he's not. He's like truly like a pure
He's
paladin.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I just love that they did that.
Like he takes his introduction's so funny because
Mm-hmm.
like this movie just goes for it.
Yeah, it
This
does.
movie just goes,
Yeah.
and I respect that so much because
Yeah.
then there's like a scene where it's just like a cat
Gets
person.
swallowed by a fish.
Yeah, and like he pulls the cat baby out of the fish and gives it to the cat person. And it's
But
like
he does it in such a gentle.
and he's just like, "You're a child," and it's like, "Oh," and like he like talks to that random person, and he's like, "I see you, brother," and I'm like, "Oh, this is so weird, but you're so genuine about it."
Yeah, and it's just, it's cool to see people take these roles. Like, I will never, I'll never crap on Chris Pine because the one thing I respect the hell out of him is that he will do anything.
Yeah.
He has never just leaned so far into I can only do this role.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie was just made up of those people, and I really respect that. Like everyone was willing to go there and be ridiculous, but not people who have had like a track record of like I can only do this. And I mean, Rajon Page can have a career as being the heartthrob guy forever. He did Bridgerton, and every person in the world fell in love with him, so he could just do that forever. And instead he's like, I'm gonna go be a paladin in like a crazy ass Dungeons and Dragons movie. And I just respect that. I like when people are willing to go, I'm not taking this too seriously,
I'm going all in.
Let's just have fun.
Yeah. And to be like, oh, what was I gonna say? Like, they are to their assignment, but they're also just like all good at what they're doing, and they're all doing kind of like different things. Oh, there was something else I kind of wanted to say, but overall, just everyone did really great. I loved his performance. I love the scene where he's just walking, and then like, oh, there's a rock.
Oh, is he gonna walk in the straight line?
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing that I think is just a really well done story beat is there's a moment about halfway through the film where Chris Pine agrees that no matter what amount of loot they get, it will be given back to the people that they're going to steal it from. Very like Robin Hood, whatever.
Prince of Thieves Among Thieves honor?
Perhaps. And in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, you could say that to get yourself to the mission or whatever, but then you might try to keep some for yourself or whatever. And I love that they used, actually, let's give the loot back to the people and it will actually save them, and they like tied that in really well. I thought that was really well done because there's basically like a massive plague that's being produced through the spell, and she starts to look down and she sees that no one's in the audience anymore because they're just like throwing the loot out and all this. I just thought that was really, really well done, and just a cool, like, there is the honor among thieves. Like it
works.
They did it. And I thought that was really cool to set them apart from like, why are we actually doing this,
Yeah.
because a lot of times we play these games because we want to be victorious, we want to feel powerful, we want to like have our character become this next level thing, and by the end of it, they really just love each other.
Yeah.
That's really what the victory was like they became like a family. And Rodriguez is in this, so this could tie into Fast and Furious.
This is just the Fast and Furious family playing D&D.
That's true. Yeah.
Who's Dom Toretto? Which character is Dom Toretto?
He's writing the story because it's all about family.
Nice.
That's right.
I like that.
So yeah, I have nothing but praise for this movie. I just think it did a good job of taking something that and there may be some bias there because like I've had really positive experiences with this, but I think they just did an excellent job of honoring those things. Nice. Thank you.
Thieving those things
among all those things. But yeah, well done.
Yeah, I totally agree. But to mention again, it's just like, I give it an 8 because yes, it does all those things well, but it doesn't do like anything that's like, oh my gosh, like you're reinventing your cinema. And I think like some of the character beasts feel a little off, and yes, I agree that the whole like treasure at the end was really cool, but it felt like, wait, why didn't the smoke just get to them? How did everyone see the treasure? And I don't know. It was like too nice of a bow where they also like they got the recognition for saving everybody, when I thought it was cool that they maybe weren't gonna get recognized, and just like the thoughtless or the unknown saviors of the town. It just all comes like, oh, okay. And it's not anything bad. It's just like this movie can't be a 9 or a 10 to me, just because.
Yeah, there's enough generic that it does come back to bite it a little bit. Yeah. It's not like they're taking on like Vecna, but like at the same time, if they did, they could be writing themselves into like. Yeah.
They toe the line perfectly between, like.
Everyone can like this movie.
Yeah.
And maybe not everyone will like love it.
Yeah.
Or like a certain part of people will not like so.
Yeah, and it wasn't impenetrable for non-fans, and it wasn't too much for a fan that's like, oh, here's 100%, here's all the quotes, and here's all the lands, and here's every single character that you wanted to see. It's like not an overload of like Dungeons and Dragons. Here it is.
Like if you want. There are movies out there if you want the really in-depth, immersive fantasy where it doesn't care what you know because it's going to explain every little detail. This one is just, here's a fun introduction to like what a cool fantasy could be.
Yeah.
You can have your Lord of the Rings, which is going to be dripping with theme and story and lore and all of this stuff, and it's going to throw it all at you at once. This is going to be like, hey, there's a place called Water's Deep. Anyway, let's go fight the bad guy, and that's okay. But that's
kind of like the game, though. It's like, oh, we're going to a really famous place.
This felt like the first like 6 sessions of a campaign, so I'm excited to see if they make more. If they don't, I'm glad we got what we got.
I would love to see more.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to see more. I think it's making a lot of money.
I hope so.
Just based off our theater alone. Like,
for sure.
Because now it's like, a lot of people play D&D, and a lot of people play board games now. And it's just like, yeah, you go with your group of people.
True.
I don't know.
Well, I don't know if you've listened to a podcast about Dungeons and Dragons, but now you have. With us. Not us. United.
United on a D&D
I just rolled a D20 and got a 20 on that ending.
Dude, yes, sir. You're a D20 in my mind.
Dude, thanks. You're 6 most days, but I'll give you a D20 some days. Nah, I'm just kidding. All right, thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
You've just listened to Not Us United. You can find us under Not Us United on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. Please leave us a review and consider subscribing to our podcast. You can reach out for future podcast topic suggestions at notusunitedpod@gmail.com.